Hey, welcome to 1500ESPN.com. I'm Derek Wetmore, and this is Andrew Kramer. We're at TCF Bank Stadium, where the Vikings just beat the Carolina Panthers 31-13, Andrew. That brings the Vikings to 5-7 on the season. They're still on the outside looking into the playoff picture, but we've talked about numerous times on the Purple Podcast this season. There's still certainly things the Vikings can learn from the rest of this season. On that note, do check out today's Purple Podcast. Have not yet recorded it as of this recording of the video, but we're going to talk about everything we talk about here on the podcast in a little bit longer form. It allows us to kind of unbutton the top button of our shirts and get into a little bit more lengthy Vikings discussion. But on this video, we're going to talk about some special teams heroics, Cordero Patterson disappearing for the first half, and blanket coverage from Xavier Rhodes. Let's start with the special teams, Andrew. 2 blocked punts returned for touchdowns. As I just wrote for 1500ESPN.com, it's the first time the Vikings have ever done that. Returned 2 touchdowns, off block punts in one half. Very rare among NFL in the history too, but you were telling me after the game that Thielen's first block punt, Adam Thielen blocked it in return for a touchdown. That was a block punt formation. But the second one, which Jasper Brinkley blocked and Everson Griffin ran back for a touchdown, that just came out of the base defense.
It did, yeah, and that's something that Mike Prefer spoke after the game, the special teams coordinator. He said that's something Jasper Brinkley apparently has been calling for weeks now. And if you know, they don't play in the base defense much. So Jasper's maybe on the field for 15, 20 snaps tops. And so he wants to get on there as much as he can. So one way he could is the punt blocking team. So he goes through there. He actually blocks the punt that Everson Griffin returned for a touchdown. So it's just one of those things where everything was working for him today. It was even something without Cordero Patterson, without some of the playmakers they were used to on offense, they were still able to go out there and get things done.
Yeah, and we talked about on the Purple Podcast, kind of previewing this game, that if they were able to get some defensive scores or something sort of fluky like that, it might help turn the game. I got to be honest, I did not see two special teams touchdowns coming like that, but it really put the Vikings in the driver's seat.
Yeah, special teams touchdowns in a situation where a guy like, you think Patterson would be the one returning those for touchdowns. Really, it was just the defense on special teams that was able to get things done. And when you're playing against a lowly Carolina Panthers team who was unable to put up more than 21 points for now 6 straight games, heck, they could have won with the punt returns alone.
Let's think about this a little bit, too. Vikings kind of on the outside looking in on the playoff picture, just outplayed Carolina Panthers, who coming into this game were a half game out of first place in the NFC South.
And they'd be first in the NFC South if they were in that division, but unfortunately for them, they're in a good division.
Yeah, unreal. Let's talk about Patterson. You mentioned him a little bit. A disappearing act in the first half. He did not see the field on offense, even though he was in there for special teams. So that led you to believe not an injury concern. What did you learn about Patterson today?
Well, I went to the locker room. Obviously, you went to the press conference, but Cordero Patterson basically said that he had no idea. He said, hey, I respect the coach's decision. I'm just playing my role. If they tell me I'm not playing this week, I'm not going to play. And it was just an odd situation hearing from a receiver because someone asked, hey, did they give you any more explanation? He said, no, not really. So Mike Zimmer, though, comes up and says that it had to do mainly with him missing practice, but then adds that kind of cryptic caveat of, but he's still going through some things. And so that was part of it. It just makes you think that, hey, his lack of involvement is, in the beginning of the season, he was getting the most snaps of any receiver, more than Greg Jennings. He was the top guy on every snap count chart, and he wasn't doing anything with it. And I think they finally got fed up with it, especially when you have Charles Johnson, who's filling in the same spot and clearly has a rapport with Teddy Bridgewater and has molded into this offense a lot quicker than Cordero Patterson did. And remember, Cordero had an entire offseason in training camp. Charles Johnson came in here in September, and he's already clicking.
And Zimmer did mention that Patterson missed some practice time this week to attend a funeral. So that could have been what he was referring to when he said he's dealing with some things, just sort of off the field or whatever.
There's plenty on the field he's dealing with, too.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, a big reason why Charles Johnson's taken over that split end role.
It really has. And think about it. On September 14th, just a couple months ago after Adrian Peterson's formal indictment came down, Cordero was the one they chose to be that last announcement in pregame theatrics, really to get the crowd pumped up, put your playmaker out there. He was the guy. Today, he was sitting there clapping his hands because that was Charles Johnson getting his spot.
Yeah, absolutely. One final thing, a huge positive takeaway from my perspective from today's Vikings 31-13 victory. Xavier Rhodes, man. He continues to come on. He was targeted often today and just had a bunch of pass breakups. One that I really thought could have or should have been an interception. But it's hard to say enough good things about the development of Xavier Rhodes, how fast and how important he's become to this defense.
Yeah, obviously the secondary had Harrison Smith for the past few years. They had a guy who was a playmaker in the secondary, but now when you have a corner that's that kind of playmaker, it allows you to stop some of those short routes. He's really grown in terms of just defending those comeback routes. You saw him deflect a couple passes against Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterback-receiver tandems in the NFL. He comes back and does that today again against Kelvin Benjamin, one of the best budding rookies in the NFL. And he said obviously he didn't have too many tricks he knew of Kelvin, who they both played at Florida State together. But obviously Kelvin was just a young freshman, sophomore then, and so he's really grown into a good receiver now. But that didn't have anything to do with Xavier Rhodes, who has grown into a great cornerback in just his second year.
And Mike Zimmer said after the game, I said, what does that allow you to do? And he didn't give it an exact direct answer, but I think we can parcel through what he's saying. He said it allows you to do some other things with some other guys. Meaning if you can have a cornerback, I'm not going to say an island on that side of the field, but if you don't have to use safety help over the top, that frees up Mike Zimmer to do all kinds of things with either Harrison Smith or Robert Bland.
Especially, like he said, if you can trust one guy, one corner on one side of the field, it's like, it's the Revis effect or the Richard Sherman effect. Obviously not quite to that level because Xavier's so young, but he's growing into that where Mike Zimmer can now give maybe Josh Robinson a little bit more help, or as he said, other guys, maybe linebackers who have struggled in pass coverage. There was actually one play I saw where after that fourth down touchdown that they threw on Josh Robinson when Cam Newton hit him, the next defensive series, Mike Zimmer came back and actually did provide a little help. He put Harrison Smith on man coverage on Robinson's guy and dropped Robinson back into his zone. Those are things you can do because you have Xavier on the other side of the field.
It's fascinating. We'll break into all of that stuff on today's episode of the Purple Podcast as soon as we go over and record that. Andrew, more on Xavier Rhodes, touch a little bit on Matt Khalil, who had a quiet day, which is a very good thing for the Vikings.
That's a great thing.
When you don't hear from number 75, generally good stuff. We'll also talk about Teddy Bridgewater, his kind of day, his development, and really look forward for the rest of the season for the Vikings. That'll do it for this Vikings video, though, Andrew. From TCF Bank Stadium, for Andrew Kramer, I'm Derek Wetmore. Thanks for coming to 1500ESPN.com, and we'll catch you next time.